probably that we've all had prayers. Prayers that didn't seem to get through. You didn't get answers. And you talked to others that were getting answers. It just wasn't happening where you were. Well, there's a home like that in Bethany. And there were three people lived there, two sisters and a brother, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And Lazarus got very sick. Now the two girls, they had a lot of different personalities. Mary's was the one to pray all the time. She kept her door closed. She didn't have to come out for anything. Just leave me alone. That's what she liked to do. But Mary was the fussy, get the job done, and get the potatoes peeled, and to bring people in to eat and so forth. And so sometimes it would rub just the long way, but you know, they had a big problem. And sometimes problems bring you together. And this is what had happened in this case, because Lazarus, the boy, the only son, or the only brother that they each had, was sick, very sick. And they wondered if it wasn't unto death. Well, when Jesus was ministering around there, they felt very safe. But Jesus was down by the border. And so down by Jordan, I believe it was. And it would take him a while to get here anyway. Well, they said, let's send somebody up there to tell Jesus we need him. And tell him that he's very, very sick. And we'd like for him to come home and to pray over him and heal him. Well, he didn't come. And I think in our lives, I can remember times when I prayed and Jesus didn't come. And there was a real waiting time. And during that time, it seems like if it's really of the Lord, you can't let go of it. But if it isn't, it just sort of fades away, and then maybe you forget about it. But it seems like that the things that are right there that are going to affect the kingdom, they just won't go away. So it looks like their prayer was over. And, of course, by Jesus not coming, what do you think happened? They began to question Jesus. Jesus, why didn't he come? Didn't he care? Weren't we special? We were his home, away from home. He loved Lazarus, and Lazarus loved him. We had great times of fellowshipping and food together, but he didn't come. So did he even get the message? Does God get the message when we pray? He got the message. So he went on and did what he had to do, and he was in no hurry whatsoever to get up to where Bethany was. And all the time, why, Lazarus was getting sicker. And so then he died. And it seems like Mary, they couldn't hardly get her out of her room. She was back there praying, and she just couldn't come out. It was too deep. And she was so full of sorrow that she said, no, Marcia, I'm not coming out. And they had to hire people, you know, that would weep and pray. That's the way they did it. And so they had all these people they had to pay. They were hired to weep and so forth and make all this noise and everything. But their hearts were so full of pain and anguish, not just because he died, but because Jesus didn't come. And I guess it does sound strange, but I can think of a lot of times in my life that Jesus didn't come. And to laugh at Ruth Graham, she said one time she was so glad that God didn't answer some of her prayers. She said, I would have married 5 different men. And she said, and when God said no, he said, I think now what he saved me from. And so, you never know when God says no, I have something better. So that's what's going on there in Bethany. And Jesus starts the long trip home. And when he got in the area, some of them were picking up and said, "Did you know Jesus is in the area?" So they sent the word out, and then the same people that have been at the funeral there, now they're back there running around and click-clacking, and what's he going to do, and so forth. So Martha heard about it, and she says, "I'll meet him by myself." So we run down the path, and she meets Jesus. And the first thing she says was, "Jesus, he's dead. Why weren't you here?" So she let go with her pain, and also with the direction that, Jesus, it's kind of your fault. You've done this for others. Why wouldn't you have done it for Lazarus? You loved him. And sometimes, I guess, if there are people around you that are getting kind of miracles that you would need, maybe in a certain hour, and then somebody close to you, it gets the answer, maybe you'd be like that too. Anyway, they were distraught. So she says, I better get Mary out here. So she goes in, tries to dodge all the singers and everything, and they're hired, so they're just hanging around to make some noise. And here is her sister, says, Jesus is calling for you. So here comes now both the girls, and the others are trying to hear what's going on. And so Jesus was trying to get a little aloneness with them. And he said, he told the disciples, because the disciples said, "Aren't you going there?" "Yes," he said, "because Lazarus is asleep." Well, he said, if he's asleep, then what are we going there for? Are we going to go sleep with him? And he said, no. And they said, well, I don't see what the big deal is if he's asleep. What's the big deal? And finally Jesus had to come down and change how he defined death. And he said, no, Lazarus is dead. Well, that was a whole different issue. And I've been reading in a lot of my own writing, where it says that the loved ones are not dead. And it does use the word sleep. And it says that these loved ones are immediately with the Lord. But until they have the resurrection or the rapture, and they are carried up first, then they they will not have the completed bodies like they will have in the resurrection. So anyway, it was settled. That's where he was. Now, wherever he was on that journey so far, we don't know. But Jesus went out and took the women with him. And on the way out there, Mary kept thinking about it. And she could see the crowds coming, and Mary, she's crying all the way, and so is Martha. And Jesus looked over at them, and he began to weep too. But you know what? Mostly why Jesus was weeping? He knew what he was going to do. The reason Jesus was weeping was what sin had done to the human race. He saw sin and death at the worst, and the sorrow, the brokenness that was left behind. And he thought and longed for the day that he would pay the supreme price, that this would not happen. Well, Jesus got closer and closer and started to pray. And he prayed this with a loud voice. Father, I thank you that you always hear me. Now the Bible said that pretty soon she comes up, Martha does, and said, Lord, I don't know if we ought to do this, you know. It's been 4 days and I think he might smell pretty bad by now. Now she's been caught this time. What are the people going to think? You know, and sometimes that gets into it. When Jesus does something unusual, I don't know. I think that wouldn't be done in the church on Sunday. So I don't know about this. But Jesus paid too attention. That was not his cautious point. He went where the need was. So anyway, with a loud voice, he said, Lazarus, come forth. Wherever death was, death heard that call. Now that's going to be a way when Jesus calls for the great resurrection of our bodies. The dead will hear it. The dead will get up and they will go. They will be caught up together with the Lord in the air, and they will be forever with the Lord. Well, I'm telling you, it happened so fast, and sure enough, there was this form of a man at the door, still bound in all of his clothes and all of his trappings and everything, and part of them had come loose, and he was probably tripping out of them, trying to get out there where the people were, but he was coming. And Jesus turned to all the people and said, you need to unbandage him and then let him go. Well, what that's saying to us, Mary had to have a part. Because before they had come out there, he said, Mary, who am I? You said I should have been here. But who am I? She hadn't said, who am I? She just said, why aren't you here? But he said, who am I? And then she said, well, even now, I know that whatever you ask the Father, he will give it to you. Even now, she said, then who am I? Well, you're the resurrection. Oh, he said, that's good enough, let's go. So she had already made that confession. She had already helped in getting that stone out of the way. Isn't it interesting that it wasn't Mary, the one that prayed all the time? No, it was the busy woman. It was the woman that was always inviting people in and feeding them and keeping the ball rolling and paying the bills and everything. And sometimes we hesitate to think that Mary, maybe she wasn't as bright and cool as Mary. Well, Mary did have the better part, but I'm telling you, I'd hate to think of a church without Marthas. Anyway, after he said that, then the people themselves got involved. And you know what the Lord wants to do? It's what God wants to do. He wants all of us to unwrap those people that are bound. They've been bound by their problems, their heartaches, their hurts, their marriages, their losses, their jobs, so many things. They've lost and lost and lost. And these become like wrappings in them. And they become like people that can't move, they can't make choices. Well, he said, it's up to the church now. And the church with the people that are all around it. And they all want to get their hand in it and pull that away. And so those trappings were off. And he didn't have to just leap around anymore. He was able to walk. He was walking as good as the rest of them. And they were hugging him and loving on him so far. Just a few more days. Why, Mary wanted to have or Martha wanted to have a big party at her house. And wanted to invite the people of the community. And sure enough, guess who was there? Yeah, there sat Lazarus in the house. And the people came, they saw him and everything. It was a wonderful display. That, you know, when it says that that one and that one were born in her. And I believe in every one of our lives, we should be able to say, that look around and say, that one and that one and that one were born in her. And so now he's sitting out there and just as good as anybody, and he's enjoyed the meeting as much as anybody, and the grave clothes are there, not there any longer, and they're ready for a feast. So if you have something, a prayer that's not answered, a prayer that you've waited a long time, you have scriptures for it, but it seems like it's deleted. Sometimes it's just waiting too long, and sometimes you think it's going to wait too long. And so you look back at this and say, why? Why did Jesus wait? So he could give a better deliverance, a resurrection. I tell you, resurrection was a lot better than just having Jesus come on his laying on his hands. Everybody else got that, but he was the only one that got the resurrection. So when he doesn't get there, on the time frame that you think he did, don't think it's over. The Bible said he did deliver, he does deliver, and he will yet deliver. That's the track record of our God. So be encouraged, and don't take your prayers for a denial or that Jesus doesn't care. No, he cares. He cares very, very much. And he cares so much that he's going to give you the best one, whether you know it or whether you don't. And you can look for it. And your Lazarus will live again. Thanks for being with us today, and it's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for some of the good things that you sent in today to me to keep us encouraged and keep telling you about Jesus. We love you, and we thank you, and we'll see you next week. Okay? Lord bless.